the fear of failure or the fear of, especially if you're like an ambitious woman, it's like we cannot have a fucking bad day because immediately somebody's going to be out there like cheerleading, waiting for you to fuck up. It's a horrible place to be. And it's very common. Almost every single ambitious woman I'm talking to right now is having the same fear. Hey there, fellow rebels. Welcome to #ActuallyICan, the podcast where we say a hearty hell yes to designing life on our own terms. I'm Katie Ripp, a lifestyle coach, business mentor, and serial entrepreneur, here to guide you through the wild ride of defying what society expects of us and embracing our authenticity. On this show, we dive deep into taboo topics like death, money, spirituality, entrepreneurship, unapologetic self-care, and personal development, all while swearing and laughing along the way. Expect down and dirty conversations, plenty of humor, and a whole lot of exploration, leaving you feeling empowered to be your truest self. Whether you're craving a good laugh, seeking unconventional self-care tips, or simply looking for some camaraderie, you've come to the right place. We only get this one short life, so buckle up and let's design yours on our own terms. Ready to dive in? Let's go. So, have you ever been coached before? I mean, I know you are a coach, like a physical coach.
I'm still in the space of figuring out like what a coach like you does, but I can make my best guesses. I've never been coached from like a, lifestyle or a professional coach perspective. So no, I guess is the short answer.
How about any other modalities, acupuncture, therapy, yoga, whatever philosophy you sign in for?
Definitely therapy. Love me a good therapy session. Just signed up for 3, actually. Did my little scheduling.
Not a girl?
Yeah. But not like I haven't been going consistently to therapy recently because I felt pretty good. Although it's funny because I'm like starting to feel like not as good right now. So I'm like, ooh, this is well timed. So anyway.
Yeah. Good. So
Mostly
you've had some experience. The best way I like to, and some coaches don't love this theory. I think it's like the most simplistic, best theory. Well, first of all, I'm not a doctor, right? Like I have a year's worth of international coaching training, but I don't have years of psychology or psychiatry. So I'm not a doctor, although I like to call myself one sometimes. And B, mostly therapy is like what has happened in your past and like to make you this way or, whatever, like whatever talk therapy or modality you use, it's usually looking backwards and seeing what's contributing to the situation you're in. Coaching is mostly looking forward. So mostly looking forward, like what can we do with the information we have? How can we peel back some of the layers to see what's like living underneath some of this? But we don't necessarily need to talk about your parents and the relationship you have with them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So any way that you like to arrive in any kind of session. So we could do some deep breaths if you feel like, let's just get into it. I'm not really sure what's going on. Like, just go. That's totally fine too. But tell me, if there's anything you want to clear, if you want to tell me, how you're feeling.
Yeah. It's like my first day back from this trip, as you know, this like lovely vacation. So I'm feeling a little bit like, that space, like you're jumping back into it. And I don't have like bad things to jump back into. It's just like, now I have to think about things. Whereas before I didn't have to think of last week. I didn't have to think about a damn thing. So nice. So I'm kind of in a space of like maybe a little scattered at the moment, but doing my best to not be. Yeah. That makes sense.
Perfect. So what would you like to explore today? You said, I know in a text, you said you had a couple of things like that maybe has been knocking on your door.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that's at the front of mind right now is I just went through a job transition. And I'm working for the same organization, which is great, really awesome, like mission aligned with my values, nonprofit, as you know. But I'm like trying to figure out what my trajectory is right now. And I'm just like not sure. And also I'm like, I was so used to the like team that I was on before. I'm like navigating some like team challenges that are causing me anxiety. And like how I show up in the workplace doesn't feel quite as good right now as it has in the past, which is like, oh no, is it me? Is it the job? Is it what's happening here?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
obviously you came to the coaching call with that topic probably on the top of your mind. What are you
Yeah.
looking for from like this coaching session? At the end of this, is there some way you'd like to
Mm.
feel?
I think I'd like to feel a little bit more clarity and maybe some like getting out of my own head,
Mm-hmm.
like having some external perspective. That's usually what I found in the past with therapy and all of that good stuff is just like I'm so in my own shit that I can't see what it actually is. And I want to
Yeah.
have like a clear vision of that so that I can actually like make thoughtful and intentional decisions about how I show up at work
Yeah.
based on some of those like external perspectives.
Awesome. So, like, if we got to the end of this call and you were like, okay, well, that makes sense. And now I can
Mhm.
do a couple of things, like take a couple of next steps. Would that feel good?
Yes,
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive on in.
Sweet.
Tell me about the first, like, where does it feel like the right place to start? And by that, I mean, do
Mm.
you want to tell me about some situations you have going on that we can sort of work through?
Yeah, I think like maybe just starting with like a quick background of when I jumped into my role and where I was coming from. I was leaving teaching, as you know, since
Yeah.
we've known each other for a few years. And that was such a stressful and anxiety ridden position. Like I loved it because I loved the kids, which is what you hear almost every ex teacher say. But the job itself was just, it was just too much. And I got into this new role at the organization I worked at where I was, working with coaches, like kids, youth sports coaches across the country. And I was like, dang, this is really awesome. I get to feel like I have some agency, like I'm helping, you know, the organization recognized my strengths and let me play into those, which was really important and really cool for me. The team I was on, it was like what you see is what you get. Like I felt very much like it felt like a little bit of a bubble. I was like, how did I find these people? Like they're very honest, they're very open. If there's like feedback, they tell you. There's like, they went by like the meeting norms and the standards of norms for collaboration for healthy teams. I was just like, damn, this is great. And very much like our organization entirely is like that. However, I'm in a new department now that has like a little bit of like history of like some turmoil and people like not communicating as well as this other team. And so that's kind of like the shift I'm experiencing right now. I'm missing that old like sense of showing up in a lighthearted way. And now I'm like showing up with this kind of foggy interpersonal stuff. And then also like my job is more stressful.
Okay.
There's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about the new job itself, like the old job
Yeah.
with your old team versus the new job.
Yeah. So the new job, this is also actually interesting. It was originally the position was vacated last fall by a former colleague of mine, was the grants management position at my organization. I am not a grants manager. I don't actually have like professional experience in development. I've worked with nonprofits for quite a while, but I'm not like a development person, right? Do have some experience doing communications work and marketing. And so they kind of retooled the position into this role called development communications manager. And that role was kind of created as like a pathway for me to join this team. So pretty cool, pretty awesome. It was also, it wasn't just about me, obviously, it was about the needs of the organization. But they were like, hey, if this is something you want to do, we want to support you in that. Also, 100% okay if you want to stay in my previous role. So the new role is like working with our partners and doing a bunch of communications and marketing campaigns to help leverage our national brand, help people become aware of our mission, vision, or values. And ultimately, the end goal is obviously to raise a lot of money. So high pressure, I think. I go back and forth. I'm like, half the time I'm like, this is super high pressure. And I like don't like that about it. And half the time I'm like, the world keeps turning if you don't.
Hop on.
Right. Like no matter what, it's not like they're going to like kick me out of my role if we don't get one foundation grant or something like that. So yeah, I go back and forth on that.
What attracted you? I mean, obviously, they saw your talents in
Mm-hmm.
that they created the position or revamped the position to sort of fit what you were looking for. What attracted you to that position? Like, you know, you had kind of a good thing going, it sounded
Yeah.
like, with your team and the job and that kind of thing. But there was clearly something that made you want to move. Do you
Yeah.
know what that is?
Yeah, it definitely like I went back and forth when making that decision. It was very interesting. Like I didn't know what to do because I was like, man, I really enjoy aspects of both of these things. And I think I could see myself succeeding at either one. One thing that I think you'll appreciate is there's the person who leads this new role, who's the VP of our current team, is a really strong female leader with a ton of badass experience. And I was like, I want to work for her.
Mhm.
And then the other part of it was, I guess, just like trajectory of growth for my job, right? Like the other role, I kind of felt like the way the organization is structured and who were in other seats on the bus, like I wasn't really going anywhere. This had a faster possible trajectory. And I'm ambitious, but I'm also like struggling with that right now because I'm just like a little overwhelmed.
You've said the word trajectory a couple of times. What's
Yeah,
the end goal on the trajectory?
that's a good question. I think I'd like to be at a director level in our
Okay.
organization and have people that I manage at some point in time. I think that would be super fulfilling as a former coach, right? Like teacher. You know, I've always kind of been in these roles where I'm the one who's like constantly doing the dirty work. And I don't want to say dirty work, it's like a very negative connotation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Your operations, right?
Yes, operational work. But I want to test out my leadership and also like acknowledge that I think I have something to bring in that space. So, yeah, I think that's the trajectory is like getting into that. I think I'm struggling because I feel like I just put a negative connotation on the word, like I said, dirty work, and now I'm like stuck there.
Let's
I
talk
think
about
it's
that.
like this. Well, I think it's like this idea of leadership too, and like being a good leader and not just a like telling people what to do kind of leader, and thinking ahead to like how I would want to show up in that space. But I'm not even there yet, so I'm getting a little ahead of myself.
Well, I don't think so. But tell me about, how do you want to show up in that space?
Oh man. Yeah. I want to be somebody who's trusted, but not feared. I feel like there's like a little bit
Oh,
of sense of fear
love
within
that.
some of
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like a weird thing. Like we just got back from a conference with our organization, which we're a fully remote organization. So we don't see each other in person often at all. And I want to be somebody that's like, I want to be like the party kid. That's not the tone I want, but I also want someone to feel like they can approach me and talk to me about anything without there being like a fear of implication of like, oh, are they going to judge me for saying X, Y, or Z? You know? Yeah. I think in terms of leadership too, there's like an aspect of like servant leadership and doing some of that, you know, operational dirty work when it needs to be done. But then I also tend to be the person who doesn't delegate well. So I fear this idea of like, it's good. It's like an interesting place. Like I'm used to just being like, oh, there's something that needs to get done. I'll just do it because I know
Mhm.
I can do it and I can get it done quickly. But you're eventually going to be in a position where I can't do that. And I'm
Yeah.
kind of finding that now. So yeah.
I mean, you are speaking to my soul right now. Because, like, this is me.
Yeah. This
I
is why I wanted to talk to you.
I really just love the fact that you can articulate it, because the trusted not feared part is so against the grain of any leadership we have in a patriarchal society, right? Like,
Yes.
and business is just, that's just the way it is. I decided to do it differently. Have I run into some issues because of it? Yep. But I also have a whole team of people that really want to help me. What I wanted to do was create a culture where people wanted to help each other.
Yes.
That's it.
100%.
Right? Like, if somebody needs help, I want somebody to be like, I can help. That's like my only mission in life,
Yeah.
as far as staff goes or leadership goes. And I also am a worker, probably like you are. So, like, I can do it all. I can make a super mean latte. Is that where my strengths lie? I don't know. Is that where your strengths lie, is to do the dirty work?
I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, I think to go back to that word trajectory is like, I have enjoyed that for a really long time. I'm starting to feel like I'm outgrowing that and I'm ready to take the next step of like, hey, I've got this. Like, vision of how things could be, who are the right people to help make that vision happen. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I'm definitely not in that job role yet, but that's what I want to do eventually. So,
Are you in a role right now where you could practice some of that?
yeah, I think so. I think so. It's so new, but I definitely think that there is ability to do that. So, yeah.
Is there something holding you back, or that when you think about doing that, you've mentioned some interpersonal skills or
Yeah.
issues. Is
Yeah.
there something inside that is going to end up keeping you from maybe trying some of this stuff out?
Yeah, I think so. It's a really interesting, I feel like in a way, and this is my sense of it, slash some things that other folks have told me outside of my own perspective. Me coming into the team was because there were some weaknesses that existed. And they really were like, we need to get somebody else in here who can help with stuff. And I feel like there's a little bit of like a threatening vibe, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to navigate that without being weird. And I feel like I'm just like feeling weird all the time.
Right. Sometimes when we try not to be weird, we just become more weird.
So weird. Yeah. There have been times where I'm like, wow, why did I say that thing? Like, that was a really weird thing to say. So I'm trying to kind of like strip away a little bit of that like perceived baggage or real baggage. I guess it could be both, and not let it affect how I work with other people. Like, but I'm finding that really hard.
Okay. Hello, my friends. It's Katie here. If you're feeling stuck or searching for more purpose in your life, I have something special for you. My new book, Midlife on Purpose, is out now. It's all about embracing midlife as a time for growth, joy, and living authentically. Packed with worksheets, tools, reflections, and trackers, this workbook is your guide to rediscovering your passions and creating a life you love. Whether you're navigating career changes, personal challenges, or simply seeking more fulfillment, Midlife on Purpose will inspire you to live boldly and with intention. Get your copy today and start your journey to a more purposeful life. Available at katierip.com and Amazon. Is there clarity around who does what?
That's what I mean. I'm a month and a half into the job, so probably not as much as there could be, but that's one of the things I'm highly and acutely aware of in terms of like trying to make sure that's always brought up. So yeah, there's definitely like, I've asked a lot of questions about that as anything has come up. I've been like, hey, is this my role? Is this not? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? So yeah.
How does that feel?
Fine at times. And then it like stresses me out at other times.
Yeah.
I think there's aspects of it that are totally good and like things are outlined as clearly as possible in job descriptions and things like that. But there's still definitely a lot of overlap. And yeah, I mean, to this person's credit, to my face, they've not been like, hey, you're trying to take X, Y, or Z from me. But there's always like, I always kind of get worried about that too, because there are parts of that person's job that have now become my job.
But they haven't said anything to you like that.
No.
Is the unspoken body language, that kind of thing, does it feel like that's there?
At times, maybe in a small way. Yeah. I think at times there are. And I think there's also, to this person's credit, they've also had any time when it does kind of reach ahead, they're like, we just need to figure out whose job this is. And I'm like, great. I agree. We do. So that's been good.
Yeah. Has there been like roles written down or, this is always difficult in any kind of team situation, right? Especially if someone came in because someone else wasn't doing their job well enough.
Yeah.
And so they brought somebody else in to like pick up your weakness. I mean, nobody loves that, right? Like there's just going to be some like defensiveness about that.
Right.
However, how much of that is your responsibility or your fault?
It's none, to be honest. Like, at least I don't feel like it should be, if I'm being
truthful. The answer is no. The answer is none, zero.
The Midwestern girl in me is like, maybe some of it because I chose to accept the job, but
we can leave the Midwest nice at the door, especially since you just got back from the coast. They don't care.
Exactly. Nope.
They don't care.
To that end, though, this has actually made me think of something that I I guess my fear is I don't want to be perceived as a person who like sets a sniper like eye on something and like knocks down anything in my way to get there. And I'm worried that like my ambitions to be a leader in this organization by default now look like there will be like collateral damage or like I don't give a shit about other people and whatever because of my ambitious nature. And that's not what I want. Like, that's not the goal. And it's not like the perception I want to have happen. But I worry that could show up in some ways, or could be that narrative could be out there.
Do you think you are a sniper?
I mean, I want a good job and I want to do a good, like, I want this career move, right? That is a career goal of mine. So yeah, I'm aiming for that, but I don't want there to be, I'd love it if there wasn't anybody who was like in the crossfire right now.
Got it. Is the way you're describing it, the like, I'm an ambitious woman, and therefore, from me to get to A to B, there's going to be collateral damage. And the only way to get there is to do it that way. And I don't want to do it that way. Have you seen anybody else do it a different way?
I mean, yeah, I think I'm speaking very specifically about this work environment and the people in it. I also know that like that's just how stuff works, right? Like it's a job, you interview for it, you work your way up, you work hard, try to find the right fit and go for it.
But do you think that like stepping on people's heads to get to the top is the only way to get to the top?
Oh God, no. No.
Right. So I'm wondering where the perception of you in being that person comes from.
It's interesting.
The way you described it was King Kong, I'm going to get to the end and I don't care who I hurt.
Yeah, and that's not what I want.
The fear is that's who you're good, like that's the perception of you. Mm-hmm. In any way, in any behavior, have you ever given anybody the reason to think that way of you?
I don't think so. No.
I mean, the answer is very likely no. Not just like, I don't think so, but like,
yeah.
So if you're staying aligned to your values and what I'm doing, and I do this with good intention all the time, how much do the opinions or the perception of you matter?
It's the self-fulfilling prophecy in that regard, because if I'm aligned with my values, then the opinions that happen will be good. So it shouldn't matter.
Right.
/ like it does matter, but it's good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Right. Like if the perception is true and it's aligned with your values. So yes, we want that perception and we want to believe that perception. The disconnect comes from you're being perceived, or you think you're being perceived as someone who you are not.
Yes.
How much of that is on you? If you're doing things exactly how you are meant to be doing them with full good intention, with aligned leadership skills, you're using your strengths for good, and you're doing that all the time, or 80% of the time, right? Like you're doing that. And then somebody perceives you, or you think somebody is perceiving you as something else. How much of that is your responsibility?
I mean, none. That's the thing, is I think what you said there that got me is like the 80% of the time, right? Like I feel really like, to go back to kind of where I started the conversation, it's like I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, and if I fuck up, like it's gonna be bad in a way that like a fuck up hasn't been bad before. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's
tell me
more
about that.
I'm more anxious about it now than I ever was before.
Describe to me what a fuck up would look like.
Oh, just, like what did I do the other day?
The ball or whatever.
Yeah, I dropped the ball, or like it can't put something together by a certain deadline, or put something out that's not a high quality product, or that the perception is wrong, right? Like there's a lot of nuance in how we communicate about our organization, and like, what if I'm just
brand
wrong?
Voice, right? And all that. Yep.
Exactly. And we're dealing with, an organization that has really strong values and it deals with youth. So that's a big deal.
Huge.
And I think I'm worried about that, because there have been, like, I think that's the other thing too, is I'm just trying to get used to the fact that I'm now in a position with marketing communications that like there are going to be fuck ups, like shit's going to happen. And I got to just be comfortable with like managing mistakes and
Yeah.
crises because
And
they'll
they might
happen.
not all be yours,
Yeah, 100%.
right?
Yeah.
Like they might not all be yours. Like, hey, I said the wrong word or, I written
Hmm.
the wrong word. There was a time in my notes here that I circled perfectionism.
Oh, yeah. I'm laughing just because, like the first 3 years of therapy I did were about that. So,
Yeah.
recovering. Yeah.
Yeah. We're all recovering perfectionists. It gets easier as you get older.
Yeah.
Just
That's true.
tell me about like if the shit hit the fan, right? Like you have
Hmm.
like a colossal fuck up. What's the consequence of that? What's the worst that could happen there?
Losing like my legitimacy and trust people have trust in me at my job. I feel like right now the trust is high, that people respect what I do. So like essentially I feel like people look to me right now as like someone who can get shit done, who does a good job. And like I don't want to have that perception go away. And I know that sounds ridiculous because I know like one mistake is not going to cause that, but it still feels hard.
Yeah. Tell me about what comes after but.
Yeah. I just have a fear of making mistakes and then losing legitimacy. And yet at the same time, I can hear myself. This isn't just this moment that I'm having this conversation. That is a silly thing to think because everybody has mistakes. Everybody will screw up. Everybody will not do their job well at some point in time. And like, what's the biggest consequence, right? Like, I think the biggest consequence is you lose your job, but
You've
that
got
doesn't,
another one of those.
yeah, it's true. It's very
Yeah.
true.
Is this something like that sort of fear of losing trust or legitimacy? Has it ever happened to you before that you've had to build yourself back up into a situation where you are right now?
No, I don't think it has. And that's the thing that's like funny is like, why am I afraid of something that hasn't happened? And also, like, I hear all of these, incredible stories of people who have had to go through that experience and how powerful it's been. And part of me is just like, why am I afraid? Yeah, it would be hard, but I don't know that I should be afraid of it, I guess.
Yeah. And
So,
I mean, do you think if something bad happened that you have the skills to like bring yourself out of it? Do you trust yourself?
yes, I do. Yes. And I trust also, like, I have so many people in my corner that it's kind of like silly sometimes to think about how many people support me. So, yeah, feel a little bit. This is the moment where I'm like, "Oh, why do I have these silly fears?" you know, like
Well,
this is,
I can
uh,
appreciate that because the fear of failure or the fear of, especially if you're like an ambitious woman, it's like we
mhm.
cannot have a fucking bad day. We
Yes,
cannot because immediately somebody is going to like, I found you out. I know you're not perfect. I know you can
yes,
make mistakes too. And somebody's going to be out there like cheerleading, waiting for you to fuck up. It's a
amen. That's what
horrible
it feels
place.
like.
Yes, it's a horrible place to be. And it's very common. I mean, I hate to say it, right? Like, I haven't been doing this that long, but almost every single person, every single ambitious woman I'm talking to right now is having the same fear in different ways, different
Yeah,
levels, different. I mean, I'm not saying you're not special because you're special. I mean, the most ambitious women also are fucking terrified of making a mistake that is going to completely wipe out their lives. And
yeah,
in reality, if you walk that fear backwards, I don't know what you could do in your job to make it like a fireable offense, but you get fired, right?
yeah,
What happens then? Like, you probably have enough savings. Maybe you don't, but like, you can probably go and find another job. I will hire
yeah.
you at the coffee shop. So, like, like not dire straits, right? Like, and
Right,
you just said, like, you've cultivated all these relationships over the years that nobody is letting you go destitute. Dot is
right.
never going to starve to death because somebody is going to help you, right? Because you've cultivated these
Yeah,
relationships. In the same breath, you've also cultivated a reputation of trustworthiness and legitimacy. Those are very hard things to break. Like in the movie world, it's like, oh my God, you make one mistake and your trust is out the window. I don't know what kind of mistake you could make, except maybe running over a child or something, right? Like on
Yeah.
purpose. But even if it was an accident, people make mistakes. And if you are in alignment with your values, which are very high values and perfectly matched for your job, what could you possibly do that would give somebody the perception that you are a money hungry, greedy ladder climber? Right? Like, I don't know what you could do. Like, do you have an answer for that?
No, I
You
don't think I
probably
could.
can't imagine it because you can't imagine it.
Yeah. No, it's just like, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that gives me the most satisfaction in my job is just being able to do really good work and have it done well and see the result of that work and see how it impacts kids and communities. And so if that's what I want to do, I don't know how anybody could find fault with that. So,
Yeah. I mean, staying in that, is that super easy all the time when somebody's like
no,
snarking at you or rolling their eyes or you're worried that they're talking about you in the bathroom or whatever? Like, is that super easy all the time? No. But
right.
when you get into these, like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if this person has this opinion about me. Getting into, am I doing the job that I was hired
Mm-hmm.
for in alignment with my values and the mission of the nonprofit? And if the answer is yes, then that person has no bearing on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. And it's a practice, right? Like when you get triggered, and I'm guessing you have good body awareness that you get triggered, right? Like whether it
Yep.
shows up in your throat or your stomach or your shoulders or your tense or, you know, whatever that anxiety feels like in your body. When you get triggered, the question to yourself might be, and you'll have to make a habit out of this, whatever that question is like, am I in alignment with my job? And if the answer is
Mm-hmm.
always yes, then you never have to worry about what that other person is perceiving about you.
I'm writing this down.
Do it.
I'm going to go on my whiteboard. Get over here.
Love that. Are you working in person? Is this an in-person situation?
No, it's all remote.
Wow. And you're feeling it through the screen?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like our remote work is a lot of things, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole thing.
Whenever I hear stuff like this too, it's always maybe the universe is working with you to like change the situation, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe they won't be there forever. Maybe you get a different opportunity. Maybe they get a different opportunity. Maybe you get a different opportunity. And also, he or she or they are very likely there to teach you a lesson.
Yeah.
And what is the lesson here?
I think the lesson is I think what you just said, am I working in alignment with my job and am I doing my job in accordance to my values? And if I am, then what else could I possibly strive for as a professional goal outside of that? And like add maybe like, am I a badass at my job? And then there you go.
Anything like becoming more clear right now? Like moving forward, what does this feel like? Or
Yeah,
look
I think it's like when I'm starting to feel like I'm getting pulled into this, like it's not even like being triggered necessarily, but it's almost of my own making. Like I'm assuming these things are happening and like whatever, like taking a moment, take a breath, step out of it, go back to like that statement or that phrase. Am I performing in alignment with my job? Am I aligned with my values? If the answer to both of those is yes, full steam ahead. Don't give a
yeah.
shit about any of this other stuff.
Yeah. Because
So,
it's not your responsibility. And I think simply
right.
asking yourself, is this true? Right? Like,
Yeah.
is that perception of me true? Even if you're worried that the perception is I'm being threatening, is it true?
No.
And their perception of you might be threatening, but that's their problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in alignment with your values and you are leading from a good place and you're leading from a place of this is better for everyone and this is better for the youth and sports and our nonprofit, and I'm not being an asshole or I'm not being a total bitch about this, then not my problem if you have some insecurities about what you're doing and your
Yeah.
weaknesses. Just not your problem. Easier said than done.
But mic drop also, because that's
Right.
pretty
But
much it.
also, I would love to also hear like, and maybe just this could be like an exercise that you write down.
Yeah.
What qualities do you love about that badass leader you have?
Mm-hmm.
Because my
Yes.
guess is that they're not threatening, they're doing it in a different way that aligns with your values. So it
Mm-hmm.
might be really helpful to just be like, what do I love about this person and how can I emulate that behavior? If it's something that's like powerful for you,
Yeah.
that might be helpful.
Yeah. 100%. That would actually be a really good thing to do in terms of like just an intentional exercise. I think just thinking of leadership in general at this point in time in my career will help me more clearly define the path I want to take.
Yeah.
So,
And that it's okay to step away from the dirty work. I mean, that could be a
yeah.
whole nother session. Is like
Yeah.
the operations versus the big dreamers versus leadership, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there are ways to do. I just had this conversation with one of my staff today. You don't have to be an expert in what you're doing to be a good leader, period.
Yeah. Let's have another conversation about that because that is actually the other like piece that I was potentially going to get into was like, I feel like a jack of all trades, master of none. And so like worry that I am not legitimate in this new role because of like my lack of experience or whatever. But I need to hear that. I need to hear that like you don't have to be an expert at everything to do.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about, like hiring a weekend manager and they were like, well, we'd have to train them up and it would take us years to get them to like management level. And I was like, no, they don't need to know shit about coffee. They don't.
Yeah.
They need to know how to
Yeah.
manage people. Those two things are not exclusive. You don't have to know how many seconds an espresso machine should run in order to make sure somebody's doing their job, period. You could be a coach, and there are lots of coaches that have the expertise in sports and have never played the sport or never
Yeah.
been a professional.
Sometimes that like beginner's mindset or that like coming in from a space outside of the expertise is actually incredibly beneficial. But,
right? Because we can get really stuck in the weeds of this thing that I know everything about is the problem. That's not the problem. The problem is up here, right? Or down here or whatever, but it's not the actual machine that's the problem or or whatever it is. We could go real far into that too. Because I mean, I opened up all three of my places. I mean, aside from drinking it out of a box, I didn't know shit about wine. I didn't know anything about coffee. And I knew very little about ice cream except that I like to eat it. Right? Like you don't need to know that stuff. You need to know people, relationships, and your own values to be a leader.
And the culture you want to have, right? Like,
and a culture that is aligned with your values. It sounds like you know your values pretty well, but there are so many people that have never taken a values assessment. Like, I have no idea what that is. I mean, when have you ever been taught about values if you've not been in like a personal development, self-help situation? I didn't take a values assessment until I was 43 years old. And it was like some quiz online, so important to know those. It sounds like you have a pretty good grasp on that, but I love this.
It doesn't hurt to revisit them and think about them in the context of that leadership piece. And
I'll send you a PDF. I have a PDF of a values assessment, like 200
that'd be great.
words or something. And sometimes it's really like each of my businesses, this could be done for your job too. Each of the businesses have their own set of values. So when I make decisions up against, like when Crossroads has to make a decision, it's not Katie Ripp's decision. It's Crossroads' decision, and it's in alignment with their values because their values are different than mine. And your job values are different than your personal values. Lots of overlap, right? Lots of overlap. But your relationship values are different than your professional values and, that kind of thing. And when we can pull those things apart a little bit, it helps to be able to say, well, I'm making this decision from a leadership role, and these are the values of my leadership.
Yeah.
These are the values of my team. And so when you make decisions, it's not so personal. None of the decisions you're making at work make you a bad person, period. But it always is nice to like, oh, I can measure that decision. Like it's a measuring stick. basically.
Yeah.
I'll send
I
that to
love
you
that.
when we're done here.
I've done it for myself personally. I've never done it from a like thinking about those different buckets. And that is a revolutionary mindset for me because I am working in a nonprofit where there is so much overlap with like, I care so deeply about our mission and what we do. And I believe in it so much and that those values do overlap. But like just having that permission to like tease those things apart.
Yeah.
And then tease apart like how I show up in work as a person, have those values as well. I'm like really excited to do that and to think about that and what it looks like.
Yeah.
And
And
remove
again,
that.
you're going to have a ton of overlap, right? Like there's going to be a ton of overlap, but there's probably going to be one significant difference that when you can remove yourself a little bit from that and you can make that decision separately.
Yep.
It's a game changer. It has changed everything for the businesses for me because Crossroads is its own person. She has her own set of values and it's different than mine.
Yeah. It's like you said,
similar.
it's just, it removes it. It's not personal anymore. And I think that's
not.
part of like where all this anxiety comes from for me is like, it's a personal, like the way that this thing falls, like, you know, whatever happens here is a reflection on me personally. And it's not. So
it's not, it's a job. It's a job. You can be really passionate about it. And I say this a lot. Ambitious women don't have a real great line between professional and personal lives. Like it's blurred at best, if it even exists at all. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we make decisions, we have to make sure that we're removing our like poor, tender hearts from it because we also have like pretty tender hearts that can be trampled on. And then all of a sudden it bleeds over into all of the other shit in your life. So keeping that stuff separate, I feel like just having its like own little values assessment is a good idea. So I'll send that to you immediately.
Thank you. That's so true. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Anything that I can help you with? Like, is there any way you want to leave the session? Anything you want to tell me? Any golden nuggets?
No, I mean, I feel like we covered a lot of them. I think the values piece, the showing up and performing, you know, authentically in my job with those things in mind, that's huge. And removing myself personally from it as well. I've gotten so many little good nuggets of wisdom from you, reframing things that I might have heard before that are now better in terms of like, I can relate to them more because you're also a badass, ambitious woman. So yeah, thank you. This has been super helpful.
Good. Yeah. What you expected or different?
I mean, I didn't have tons of expectations, like, but this is great. No, I'm so happy. Like, I'm so glad that I was feeling a little bit vulnerable being like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast and do a coaching session. And I'm so glad that I did.
Yay.
So thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest here. I loved talking with you and I could do that all day long. So if you want to do it again, I would love to hear, you know, like the next week, if there was anything like that came up that you could do differently, that you did do differently.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm actually looking forward to going into this week kind of after a reset vacation wise, coming back into the job with some new space and perspectives, because I think that's going to be super helpful. Thank you.
Good. Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you, Katie.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
You bet. Bye. And that's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you enjoyed diving deep into the world of living authentically with me. Before you go, don't forget to connect with me on Instagram. Shoot me a message at Katie Rip. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode and connect with you further. And remember, if you want more details on today's episode or just want to explore more about designing your life unapologetically, head on over to my website at katierip.com. There you'll find all the juicy details and resources you need to keep the inspiration flowing. Lastly, if you'd like to join me on the show, whether it's to tell about your experience of designing your own life, to share your expertise, or if you'd like to participate in lifestyle coaching live on air, don't hesitate to reach out. Your story could inspire countless others on their own path to living authentically. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep living boldly, designing your life, and remember, #actually, I can.